In 1989, the New York Times coined a term to describe a seemingly impossible retail phenomenon happening at a single boutique in Manhattan. A garment could be designed, manufactured, and placed on a store rack in just 15 days. Before this moment, the global apparel industry operated on a rigid biannual calendar, dictating seasonal trends months in advance with massive upfront capital risk. This new model shattered that paradigm, transforming clothing from a durable good into a rapidly perishable commodity. It was the birth of fast fashion, an economic engine that would soon rewire global trade, consumer psychology, and the fundamental definition of value. The architect of this acceleration was Amancio Ortega, who opened the first Zara store in northern Spain in 1975. Rather than hiring elite designers to predict what the public might want a year later, Ortega built an agile observation machine. Store managers became intelligence gatherers, feeding real-time customer feedback directly to a centralized design hub. If a particular style of jacket sold out on a Tuesday, a modified version could be drafted, cut, and shipped by the following week. This inverted the traditional supply curve, replacing speculative forecasting with reactive, data-driven manufacturing. Driving this reactivity was a radical application of just-in-time manufacturing, a concept originally pioneered by Toyota for automobile assembly. Zara applied this hyper-efficient philosophy to textiles by keeping production geographically close to its distribution centers, utilizing factories in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. By holding fabric in its raw, undyed state until the last possible moment, the company could pivot its entire inventory based on immediate market demands. This vertical integration minimized stockpiles of unsold inventory, practically eliminating the need for the deep discount markdowns that routinely bled profits from traditional retailers. The operational speed birthed a highly lucrative psychological trigger within the retail environment. By intentionally limiting the production runs of specific garments, the brand engineered artificial scarcity. A shopper who hesitated to buy a dress knew it would likely be gone by their next visit, replaced by entirely new stock. This constant churn trained consumers to visit stores not once a season, but once a week. The intricate machinery of rapid inventory turnover transformed passive browsing into an urgent, impulsive acquisition loop, fundamentally altering the dopamine reward system of modern consumerism. While the Spanish giant proved the viability of speed through vertical integration, its Swedish rival, H&M, demonstrated how to scale the concept globally without owning the factories. Instead of keeping production close to home, H&M built a sprawling, decentralized network of independent suppliers spread across developing nations. This asset-light model relied on intense volume and ruthless negotiation to drive down unit costs. By pitting thousands of overseas factories against one another in a constant bidding war, the company secured unprecedented profit margins while outsourcing the capital risks of maintaining physical manufacturing infrastructure. The true catalyst for this decentralized model arrived in 2005 with the expiration of the multi-fiber arrangement. For decades, this international trade agreement had imposed strict quotas on the amount of textiles developing nations could export to the West, protecting domestic manufacturing. When the quotas vanished, the floodgates of globalized production burst open. Corporations rushed to relocate their sourcing to countries with the absolute lowest wages and the weakest regulatory frameworks. This geopolitical shift permanently decoupled the design of clothing from the physical and moral realities of its creation. The immediate financial result was a deflationary miracle for retail prices and a race to the bottom for labor costs. As global supply chains lengthened and fragmented, the wholesale price of garments plummeted, allowing retailers to maintain artificially low prices on the rack while simultaneously expanding their profit margins. This economic magic trick relied on a hidden subsidy paid not by the corporation, but by the unseen hand stitching the fabric. The intricate pricing models of fast fashion demanded that production costs remain suppressed, regardless of local inflation or the rising cost of raw materials. The human toll of this relentless downward pressure on prices became impossible to ignore. In nations like Bangladesh and Cambodia, the desperate competition for Western manufacturing contracts resulted in suppressed wages and dangerous working conditions. Factory owners, squeezed by the razor-thin margins dictated by global brands, routinely cut corners on building safety and worker welfare. The devastating realities of these labor practices were violently exposed by catastrophic industrial failures, revealing that the true cost of a $5 t-shirt was being subsidized by the systemic exploitation of vulnerable populations. Following public outcries over factory disasters, the corporate architects of these supply chains utilized the very complexity of their networks as a legal shield. Brands argued that because they did not directly own the factories, they could not be held entirely responsible for the conditions within them. A labyrinthine system of unauthorized subcontracting emerged, where approved factories would quietly outsource orders to unregulated shadow facilities to meet impossible deadlines. This deliberate opacity allowed corporations to maintain plausible deniability, protecting their brand equity while continuing to benefit from the cost savings of unregulated labor. Beyond the human cost, the economic engine of constant newness generates a staggering environmental impact. The apparel sector became one of the most resource-intensive industries on the planet, consuming roughly 93 billion cubic meters of water annually just to cultivate cotton and process textiles. The toxic runoff from synthetic dyes, heavily utilized to achieve vibrant, trend-driven colors, routinely poisoned waterways surrounding manufacturing hubs. Because the business model depends on high-volume consumption, the ecological degradation is baked into the profit margins, treated as a free externality rather than a cost of doing business. Just as the original pioneers disrupted traditional retail, a new generation of ultra-fast fashion behemoths emerged to disrupt the disruptors. Companies like Shein leveraged advanced algorithms to scrape social media for micro-trends, bypassing human designers entirely. Instead of producing thousands of items per style, these platforms order runs of just 50 to 100 garments, testing the market in real time. If an item gains traction online, automated systems instantly trigger mass production. This algorithmic hyper-efficiency stripped the final remnants of friction from the supply chain, accelerating the cycle of consumption to unprecedented speeds. The dominance of these digital-first platforms is heavily subsidized by a specific loophole in international customs law known as the de minimis threshold. By shipping individual, low-value packages directly from overseas factories to consumers' doorsteps, these companies legally bypass the import tariffs and taxes that traditional retailers must pay when importing bulk cargo. This regulatory blind spot effectively grants foreign ultra-fast fashion brands a massive, government-sanctioned tax advantage, allowing them to undercut domestic competitors while flooding postal systems with millions of disposable garments every single day. The cumulative effect of these economic and regulatory maneuvers has fundamentally devalued clothing in the public consciousness. Garments are no longer viewed as investments to be repaired and maintained, but as single-use items designed for a social media post and immediate disposal. The average consumer now purchases 60% more items of clothing than they did 2 decades ago, yet keeps each garment for half as long. This psychological shift is the ultimate triumph of the fast fashion engine, ensuring infinite demand for a product that is designed to become obsolete almost immediately. Yet the hyper-optimized nature of these global supply chains also represents their greatest economic vulnerability. When global logistics networks face sudden shocks, the lack of buffer inventory transforms from a strategic advantage into a catastrophic liability. Shipping bottlenecks, fluctuating raw material costs, and geopolitical tensions easily fracture the delicate timing required for just-in-time manufacturing. The relentless pursuit of efficiency stripped all resilience from the system, proving that a model built on razor-thin margins and perfect global synchronization is inherently fragile when confronted with real-world volatility. Recognizing this fragility and facing mounting public pressure, the industry is now wrestling with growing calls for sustainable alternatives. Institutional investors and regulatory bodies in Europe are beginning to draft legislation that would hold brands financially accountable for the entire life cycle of their products, threatening the core profitability of the disposable model. The concept of a circular economy, where garments are designed for recycling and materials are continuously reused, has gained traction as a necessary evolution to prevent catastrophic ecological and regulatory backlash. The corporate response to this existential threat has often manifested as sophisticated greenwashing, an economic strategy designed to placate consumer guilt without fundamentally altering the business model. Brands launch highly publicized recycling initiatives or release small collections made from organic materials, while the vast majority of their revenue still relies on the mass production of synthetic, non-biodegradable garments. These sustainability campaigns function primarily as marketing expenses, creating an illusion of responsibility that encourages consumers to continue purchasing at high volumes under the false premise of environmental stewardship. The economic engine driving fast fashion's global dominance is ultimately a machine running on borrowed time and hidden subsidies. It is a masterpiece of logistical engineering and behavioral psychology that has democratized style while simultaneously externalizing its immense costs onto the environment and the world's most vulnerable workers. As the physical limits of planetary resources and the patience of global regulators are tested, the industry faces an unavoidable reckoning. The true challenge is no longer how fast a garment can be made, but whether the intricate system that created it can survive the true cost of its own efficiency.